Hey, it's Tyler. I wanted to talk about Pathfinder First Edition some more, so consider this the second part of the review. I want to talk about archetypes this time. Ignore the big wooden thing in the background. There's some wrestling mats. I did some dagger fighting earlier today in my wrestling class, of course. Not I wasn't going around knife fighting people. For real. Archetypes, I think, are one of the things that make Pathfinder. They just make Pathfinder First Edition. There's not really an adjective I could put in there that would clearly describe it. And if you haven't played or at least looked through Pathfinder First Edition, yeah, I don't think you would get it. Let's see. One of the typical problems of D20 systems. Actually, I'm going to broaden that to one of the problems with sword and sorcery settings, fantasy settings, regardless of what level of fantasy they are, high, low, mid, you're doing Lord of the Rings, Conan stuff, all the way up to the modern, like, fantasy superhero stuff. The martial classes, the fighter, to some lesser extent the barbarian, the ranger, they tend to be very underwhelming. It's kind of like once you've played a fighter ranger, you've played them all. As far as the game mechanics are concerned, of course you can have a character that behaves in different ways, but they're pretty much going to be rolling more or less the same stuff every single time you play one. So maybe the role-playing part is beneficial, but that's entirely on you. So I don't like to get bogged down in that when reviewing a system, because what you bring to the table, that's completely irrelevant of what the system is bringing to you. The system should be bringing pretty much the third letter. It should be bringing the third letter and not getting it in the way of RP, the first two letters. So what are archetypes? Archetypes are basically, and let's look through some of them here. You pick a class like fighter, and fighter gives you, this might seem a little scary if you haven't played a crunchy system before. Oh, what's all this? What's all this? It gives you all this crap, and then you get bonus feat, armor training, bonus feat, weapon training, bonus feat, armor training, bonus feat, weapon training, bonus feat. That's pretty much it. So, I mean, even if you don't know what any of this means, you can gather. This gives you more stuff. You're better at using armor, and you're better at using weapons. Cut and dry. But you can also select an archetype. Any of these. Oh, and as a quick aside, another big benefit of Pathfinder that I'm not going to make a whole video in and of itself in is the open gaming license and whatever Paizo's moving towards now. It's all free. You can go on D20 PFSRD or Archives of Nethys. I'm using D20. I prefer Archives of Nethys, but it doesn't look as pretty, so I'm not going to do that for video. It's white on black, for some reason. These are all different things that change the way the class works. So let's say we wanted to be an archer. Well, there you go. You're an archer. So you want to play a ranger, but you don't want to be tied up with all the like pseudo magical stuff and herbalism. You just want the combative part of an archer. There you go. You got it. You want to be really good at using armor. Okay, sure. You want to be an unarmed fighter, punching and kicking people, but you don't want to be tied up in like the Eastern mysticism of a monk. That's what the brawler's for. Maybe you want to be a sort of roguish type in the combative sense and not in the, skulking around, picking locks, disabling traps and such. And you're just kind of a general dickish person, and you hit people in the back of the head with clubs and move around pretty quick. So, crossbowman, see archer. Let's see. Freehand fighter. Maybe you want to be like a traditional, fencing duelist. Have an open hand to do some stuff. Now, okay, so what's the why? Where are we just, putting a coat of paint on our stuff. No, they pretty drastically changed the way that you actually play the game. So, for example, let's look at Viking. Sure. Viking, you get the opposite of bravery. Instead of you being harder to intimidate or be made afraid, get feared. It's harder to scare you with bravery. Instead, it becomes easier for you to scare other people or things. You also get much better with the shield. So it encourages you to wear lighter armor, wear a shield, use a shield instead. You get the rage ability as a barbarian at a little bit of a lower level. And you get rage powers instead of bonus feats, if you would like. So if you wanted to play a barbarian, but you kind of wanted the guise of a Viking warrior with a little bit more flexibility, you're a little more combative and niche and expertly trained in combat, right away, there it is. I can't tell you how many times I've been DMing another system and somebody has like a very clear idea of what they want for their character, but the system just doesn't support that. And I know fans of rules light systems will say, well, in a rules light system, you can just hand wave that. You can do anything. You can just imagine it. Yep. But you can. But when you've got real crunch backbone supporting what it is that you want to do, it supports the role play. It does what the game is supposed to do, rather than getting in the way of the gameplay or being totally disconnected in a separate component. It's actively supporting your character concept. And it also leads to less work for you. You don't have to go, man, okay, I think there's something kind of like that. We can homebrew this, and this, and then are you really playing the same system? No, I mean, you can be like, yeah, I want to be a fighter. And it's like, oh, okay, that could be a lot of things. What kind? It's like, I think we want to be like an ex-guard that's gotten bored of that life, and so he's gone on to, and it's like, okay, Phalanx Soldier and Polearm Master sound like what you want to do. Bam. There you go. Immediately, we have concrete benefits that make it clear. You don't have to start the session telling people, give a big info dump to the rest of the party, the standard, you start in a tavern, and then it's like, would you give us a short little spiel about your characters. And the short spiel, inevitably one of the players starts reading you off this 2 pages of nonsense because they know they're never going to get to show that if they don't read it verbatim. Whereas it's like, no, you get into these cool things where maybe right after combat, it's like, damn, this guy's really good with a spear. I've never seen that. Where, what did you do? Or maybe it's the inverse. Maybe you're just like the game. You're like, ooh, let's see. Crossbowman seems cool. Yeah, I like this. Ooh, you get like sniping abilities. Yeah, I like the idea of this. I like the gamey idea of this. And then you start fighting, and maybe one of the other player characters is like, dang, where'd you get to be such a good shot? And in the moment you go, ooh, that's a good question. My father was an arbalist. He was a member in a crossbow team, and I took after him. Or maybe the made crossbows. Or maybe you come from a town where crossbows are made. So the archetype can either support an idea that you already have, or you can just pick it because you think it's cool, or you like or you're power gaming. Maybe you are straight up just power gaming, but then you can have whatever you've chosen actually support the RP by, oh yeah, why are you a brawler? Why choose the closer weapons? And it's like, oh, well, I'm always going into dungeons. I don't have room to, a spear's great if you've got the room to it, but, you got a 10-foot long spear and you're walking into, 5-foot high, doorways, and you're constantly just banging it into stuff, and everyone knows where you're going, and it's just not good. Now, then it makes you start thinking about your character, as long as, again, your role players. If you're not a role player, yeah, it's just going to be a glorified board game, but that's not a problem with the system. The system will highlight that as a problem, but it will also highlight the good if you are a role player. Let's take a look at a couple others. I think the wizard ones can be pretty interesting. Wizard archetypes, they can really change how you play the game entirely. Let's see. An issue with these. I will mark against them. Here we have Pact Wizard FF and Pact Wizard HH. Oh, well, what are these from? Yeah, these are from 2 different books. So, Paizo has a lot of different people working on different supplements, and sometimes they will call different archetypes the same thing and release them in 2 different books. So by the time they hit, the online databases, it's like, oh shit, which Pact Wizard did you mean? The Pact Wizard from this supplement or the Pact Wizard from that supplement? Yeah, Familiar Folio or the other one? Yeah. But, maybe you want to be more of an Eldritch focused, sort of occult wizard, but your DM or you don't want to use the occult rules because they're kind of a whole new game just using the Pathfinder system. They introduce a ton of subsystems. So maybe instead you get, you take, Elder Mythos Scholar, and you get a bond with an object instead of with a familiar, and this object, you get a talisman that allows you to detect the sort of Lovecraftian things in the world. And this too, now your DM gets to go, okay, one of my players is this. That gives me a bunch of ideas. It should, at least. Because if one of your players is playing something like this, are you going to include no Eldritch phenomena in your game? That would kind of suck for that player. They would kind of be playing a nothing burger of a character. So that can allow you to throw, plot threads here and there where it's like, ooh, okay, knowing that, I can put this here and this character will be able to deal with it. Or maybe, it was already there and it's like, oh, okay, now this is going to be a little easier to deal with. Or maybe in a sandbox campaign, okay, I'm pretty sure the players are going to lean more towards this plot thread than this one because of what these characters are. So it's not railroading, but you can get an idea as a DM. Okay, because of the flavor that's built into these characters and what they're good at because of what the mechanics are doing, I can kind of get a better idea. I don't need to do as much prep work because I've already just got, something Eldritch is going to happen if we've got an Elder Mythos cultist wizard and a psychic and, a medium. We're probably going to be having an occult campaign of some sort. Even if that's not what you as the DM intended, that's what your player... Of course, you as a DM can always go, I don't want to do this, pick something else. But assuming you're running games more as a see what your players have made and then go, okay, this sounds good. Does this sound good to everyone else? Always have a session 0, kind of an aside. Yeah, I absolutely love archetypes. And that's not even to get into, of course, you can multi-class. So, we can start doing crazy stuff like taking archetypes of one class and then mixing it with levels and archetypes of another class. I'm currently playing a Cavalier Vigilante that has a sort of alter ego as like a fantasy Judge Dredd type figure, and his day job is as a city guard, and he has a cavalier to ride a horse around and get from one point to the other, and then he stables up his horse and gets off of it and is a completely different figure by night. And yeah, there's just so many. You will literally never run out. New campaign, I just don't have an idea for a character concept. I'm just going to start randomly reading through archetypes. Some people will tell you there's some trap archetypes out there, like, oh, this is only good if you're in a water campaign. Okay, that's not a trap archetype. Why the hell would you pick, I don't know, the fighter aquanaut archetype if your DM has not told you it's going to be a heavily water-based campaign? Like, that's not a trap. That's why aren't you having session zeros? Or some things like, why would you ever take ranger when the fighter archer is just better at being an archer? And it's like, well, because the ranger gets an animal companion, and the ranger gets twice as many skills, and the ranger gets 1st through 4th spells. It's like, yeah, but why do you want 1st through 4th spells when you could just get 9th level spells with the wizard? And it's like, maybe you're in a small party and you can't fill every single role, and you would like someone to always be there to fall back on, to have some capability. That's the point of the ranger. Yeah, they're not going to be doing as much damage as the fighter, but ask the fighter to be competent at following tracks. Ask the fighter to be competent at stitching up wounds. Ask the fighter to cast a spell or send their hawk ahead to get a good look at something. They're not going to do that just because they're not good at it. The archetype doesn't change that. It makes them better at doing damage, which is what the fighter is ultimately going to be for. You can build a fighter that can do disarming and, be sort of supportive in combat rather than just straight up dishing out damage. But, I mean, you pick the thing named the fighter, so that's not really a trap, right? There's... it tells you in the name what they're there for. The fighter's for combat. You're not going to be great out of combat. That doesn't mean you can't roleplay. That doesn't mean you can't play an intelligent fighter that maybe is not as skilled or as educated as one of the other classes, but is still capable of doing something outside of combat. And yeah, I'm kind of beating a dead horse at this point, though, with obviously you have to roleplay to make any of what I'm saying work. It's a role-playing game. What are you going to do? But if you are, man, the archetypes, they just... It's just so nice to think, or to have a new player that's never played Pathfinder come to you and go, ooh, I've got a weird character concept. Do you think... And they've got that trepidation like, oh, other DMs have told me no, that's not going to work. We just can't. There's something similar. But in Pathfinder, you can say, yeah, here you go. Here it is. There's occasionally the thing like Strangler Brawler, where Strangler, it's in the name, Brawler, you would figure they need to grapple people. They do not get improved grapple as a free feat. Why? No one knows. Oh, you're going to break the game by giving... No. You don't. You don't. Just give it to them. And if you break the game in favor of your players, then... Oh no. Have the pendulum... Oh, they've gone through 3 encounters that they've just absolutely blasted through. Give the same thing to the enemies. See if it swings the pendulum the other way. If it swings too far the other... It's just trial and error, And sometimes... I mean, look at real life. You have, the Battle of Rorke's Drift. 100 or so British soldiers with rifles versus 1,000 Zulu soldiers with spears and shields. Is that a balanced encounter? No, I wouldn't say it is a balanced encounter. But it's one of the most famous, infamous military battles of all time. It's very interesting. So are we looking for balance, or are we looking for something that's interesting? Is it compelling for us to both flip a coin and see who lands on more heads after 10 of them? No, but it's balanced. So that's sort of addressing some of these archetypes are imbalanced. Well, you're role-playing. The archetypes are good for role-playing. They either are good for role-playing because you already have the character concept, or you like the archetype and they help build the character concept. balance is sort of a non sequitur in an RPG because, well, you know, it's role playing game. The game's a third of it. It's there, you know. If you're giving people an ability at level 1, which is like there are no limits to this use, and you can just kill any enemy you want for free, anytime you want, and only one of the like 40 classes gets this. It's like, okay, well now we're too unbalanced, but I don't think there's anything in Pathfinder that's like that. There's no I win the game button. But again, your players shouldn't be trying to win the game anyways. I think that's all I have to say on archetypes. I could go into like individual ones a million times. Do you guys play Pathfinder? If you have, do you like archetypes? Do you have a favorite archetype? If you don't, go ahead and go to D20 PFSRD or Archives of Nethys and click on a class and just start scrolling through the archetypes, see what you think looks cool. D20 takes the Galarian setting flavor out of things, so some things are made setting agnostic, but they're pretty cool. There's some really cool ones that go even deeper because they bake your character into the setting, like Hell Knights, for example. It's like, yeah, what's a Hell Knight? Well, you get to find out if you want to become one. So, yeah, I really like archetypes. I think it's one of the best things about Pathfinder First Edition's design, and it's a real shame that they took it out. Whew, that was a long one. All right, stay tuned for the next part of that. See ya.